everybody, it's Workshop Wednesday. Today we're going to make some tool handles. I have some curly maple, cherry, and walnut kiln-dried lumber stock left from my flatwork days, and I cut them to appropriate lengths, ran them through the planer. One of the boards was twisted, so I ran the face through the jointer until it was flat, and then I took that face over, put it face down on the planer, and flattened the other side, so now they're parallel. I'm going to cut them all to the same width, and I made these blanks a little bigger than they needed to be, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough room to make the handle kind of beefy if I decided that's what I wanted. I watched a video by Reed Gray, whose YouTube channel is RoboHippy, and he made handles for actually I think the same kinds of D-Way tools. And the way he describes it is that it's a sandwich. You've got two pieces of bread on the outside, and then the centerpiece, which is planed to the same thickness as the handle of your tool, is your peanut butter and jelly or your ham or whatever. I'll put a link to Reed's video in the description box so you guys can check that out. This will all make a lot more sense when we get the middle part cut to accept the rectangular tang of the tool. So I measured the depth of the tang of the tool and marked how far that's going to go into the handle. Just laying this out with a tri-square, I guess you call that thing. And so now I'm marking out the centerpiece that had to get cut out. You guys didn't see that because I spent an hour arguing with my bandsaw as to whether or not it was going to behave. I finally got it sort of at least happy enough that it would cut these boards, but we're not on speaking terms again. I'm not sure what its problem is. Anyway, I went through all that trouble of flattening and paralleling these blank pieces, so I'm gonna make sure that all of the little tidbits that get left behind from the bandsaw got cut off, sanded smooth, and then I wiped all the dust off. One of the things that I did before I started turning was I made bandsaw boxes, so I have glued up hundreds of blanks of, laminated kiln-dried stock. There are a couple of schools of thought. Some people say you don't need to put glue on both surfaces that you're going to join. Some people say that you do. I always have, and I've never had any issue with any of the laminations that I've done for any of the boxes or anything, so I go ahead and I put glue on both sides of it. I got a double-ended silicone spatula, I think from the dollar store, that works really good as a glue spreader. So you see how the sandwich gets made. Now we're going to clamp them all up. More clamps. More clamps. You can never have too many clamps. Now we unclamp. I kind of wiped the top off, the excess glue, but the bottom always has a lot of drips on it. So I want to put these on the chop saw and make both ends completely square to the face so that when I put it on the lathe, my ends will be square. So I just knocked the glue bits off the best I can and then put them on the jointer, and then I have two faces that are square to each other that when I put them on the chop saw, it will make the ends come out square. Sorry, I know that wasn't really clear, but hopefully you guys are understanding what I'm trying to say to you in my Lisa speak. But you have to make sure you put the right face up against the fence or it doesn't do any good. Silly girl. I put a ring of thick CA glue around the hole and then glued a piece of that cut off maple so that I had something for my tail center to hold on to. In Reed's video, he has a cup center that's big enough that it spans the hole where the Tang is going to go into, but I just have my stock Laguna tail center and it wasn't big enough to span that gap, so I just glued that piece of maple there so that it could hold on to it, and it ends up working out really well. I started all of them between centers and put a tenon on the one end pretty quickly so that I could get them into the chuck. I will need to be able to take the tailstock away at the very end to take that little piece of maple off. So I get it kind of round and then we'll put it in the chuck. This is a piece of walnut, but it's got some really interesting sapwood. It's got the normal purple that you see a lot of times, but it's also got some really cool kind of a light brown. I didn't really have a particular shape in mind when I started making these. I kind of based the shape on the tools that I have that have wood handles, and then I left them a little bit thicker and a little heavier because I think my favorite handles are actually the ones that are on my Thompson tools. They're a little bit chunkier and they're heavy. I like that. I've never made tool handles before. All of my hurricane gouges came with handles, and with the Thompsons, I ordered handles with both of the gouges that I bought. So this is the first time that I've done this. And I'm making these handles because a viewer sent me an amazing care package full of all kinds of goodies. Included in that care package of goodies were 4 D-Way scrapers. So I have to make beautiful handles for these beautiful scrapers. And I want to send out a huge thank you to this viewer. This was an incredibly generous gift, and I am humbled. So many, many thanks, my friend. I got the very end of this tenon just a hair small, so I left the base of it just a hair big, figuring that I will knock the copper fitting on there with a hammer and that will help it seat if it has to, peel the wood down a little bit. With the exception of a parting tool, I turned pretty much all of these handles with just my spindle, roughing gouge, and my largest spindle gouge. One of my other workshop projects I've been doing is reconfiguring my dust collection system behind the lathe. I can't believe what a difference it's made taking the squishy pad off of that sanding mandrel. For the coarser grits, I had no idea. I assumed that the squishy pad would help it to conform to the surface more, but man, if you're having trouble with ridges or lines being left behind and they're not sanding out easily, that's something to check. Because I didn't get the CA glue right up around the opening where the Tang is going to fit in, when I parted that piece of maple off, it just popped right off, which is nice. I had a nice clean edge there. I put a coat of tried and true wood varnish on these as the finish, and I'm buffing them off with 4/0 steel wool. You can see this cherry and curly maple one I've got there. I kind of styled that handle after the Easy Wood Tools carbide handles. That one's a little bit longer, and I'm going to put the round nose scraper on that one. The other scrapers are negative rake, so I'm using the slightly shorter length tool handles on those. I had no idea that putting the ferrules on was going to be the most complicated part. My initial plan was to cut them off before I put them on the tool handle, but I couldn't hold on to them and make the tubing cutter work even with vice grips. So I went ahead and pounded them on, and as I figured, because I left the diameter a little bit thick at the bottom, I had sort of some little wood shavings. So I took my carving knife, went around, cleaned those up, cut all of that off nice and flush, and then pounded the ferrule down on the handle the rest of the way. And then I went ahead and put a little dimple in it with a metal punch just to make sure that it didn't go anywhere. So then after I got the dimple put in to hold the ferrule still, I cut it off with just a plumbing tubing cutter. I was a little too precise with my measuring for the Tang opening. It didn't quite fit down in there, so I used a drill bit to open it up a little bit, and then just because there was a little bit of side-to-side play, I mixed up some 5-minute epoxy, and I'm just going to go ahead and glue those scrapers into the handles. I know you guys can't see what I'm doing, but I'm using the popsicle stick and drizzling some epoxy down into the hole. I widened the gap up enough that there's airspace on either side so that I was able to seat the Tang down in there fully. And they are done. Curly maple and cherry, walnut and curly maple, curly maple and walnut. And now I gotta go try them out. Thank you guys for watching, and a huge thanks to the viewer who sent these to me. I really, really appreciate it. Y'all be safe out there.